All right. So good evening. Thank you for attending the 15th Annual Drawing Discourse Jurors Lecture. My name is Tammy Beldew, and I'm the Department Chair and Professor of Drawing at UNC Asheville. 15 years ago, I created the Drawing Discourse exhibition with the intent to demonstrate the continued significance of drawing through both conventional and innovative methods. For the first Drawing Discourse exhibition in 2009, artist-author Deborah Rockman juried pieces from the 564 works submitted by 183 artists. Internationally recognized jurors Alex Kanevsky, Jerome Witkin, Susan Hauptman, Tim Lowley, Val Britton, Edgar Gerens, Scott Noel, Stuart Shills, William Beckman, Claire Gilman, Pamela Sundstrom, Catherine Murphy, and Charles Ritchie have followed, bringing both the exhibition and the university recognition. As a result, both the quality and the quantity of entries increases each year. Initially, two major goals were achieved with this exhibition. The first, an exhibition that focuses on contemporary drawing, and the second, to host a visiting juror through artist lectures. Over the years, the ripple effect has extended beyond this initial scope to include cash and purchase awards, exhibition catalogs, student scholarships, and additional programming such as workshops, studio visits, podcasts, and panel discussions. Specific programming associated with the Drawing Discourse exhibition this year includes a collaboration with Suggested Donation Podcast, who have created a special drawing edition this year with artist Christopher Gallo. Additionally, we will host conversations and coffee here on the UNCA campus tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., where internationally recognized artist Carol Prusa will discuss her work. In efforts to keep this exhibition a student-centered experience, the advanced drawing students here at UNC Asheville will also have the unique opportunity of choosing two exhibiting artists to record a virtual studio visit. All of this, of course, will be posted on our departmental website. This year, juror Phong had to select from 1,358 entries submitted by 407 artists from 6 different countries. Mr. Bui selected a total of 49 pieces for the exhibition that is currently displayed in the S. Tucker Cook Gallery in Owen Hall on the campus of the University of North Carolina, Asheville. Phong Bui is an artist, writer, independent curator, and co-founder and publisher, artistic director of the Brooklyn Rail, Rail Editions, River Rail, and Rail Curatorial Projects. Bui has organized more than 60 exhibitions since 2000, including Artists Need to Create on the Same Scale That Society Has the Capacity to Destroy, an ongoing curatorial project that was exhibited in 2019 as an official collateral event of the Venice Biennale at Colby Museum in Waterville, Maine, and at 7 venues across New York in 2022. In 2014, Bui was named one of the 100 most influential people in Brooklyn culture by the Brooklyn Magazine, and in 2015, the New York Observer dubbed him as, quote, ringmaster of the Kings County art world. From 2007 to 2010, he has served as curatorial advisor at MoMA PS1, and he was a senior critic at Yale MFA, Columbia University MFA, and the University of Pennsylvania MFA, and has taught graduate seminars in MFA writing and criticism and MFA photography, video, and related media at the School of Visual Arts. Bui was a recipient of an honorary doctorate from the University of the Arts in 2020 and the American Academy of the Arts and Letters Award for Distinguished Service to the Arts in 2021. I am most pleased that Phong is here with us virtually tonight to talk about his work. Thank you for being here, Phong.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind introduction, Tammy, and thank you for those who are being here at this virtual screen with all of us here. I never thought that I'd be also as well-versed as we all here to communicate through this technological mediation, really, so to speak. But it's important to understand the context, I think, or ever for however difficult thing can be, technology is just a tool. As I was telling Tammy not long ago, I never had an iPhone until only 3 years ago. And now I'm obsessed with how to explore history, a lot of resources through technological resources. So it's just a matter of knowing how to do it, you all. As the rail is an organism that trying to share knowledge since it's a free paper. From the very get-go, I was very aware of how to essentially pass on the baton, cultural baton from the older generation to the younger generation. When I came to New York, the experiment culture was fleeting. I think the idea when people beginning to migrate to academy, it can be very detrimental to the experimental culture because essentially the idea of bohemian life is no longer possible, you know? So I was very romantically involved with the idea of recreating a community in Williamsburg, in Greenpoint, where I just moved here in early 1994, and living through it, realizing that there's not enough critical rapport among artists. And to wait for New York Times to come is may as well waiting for Godot in Beckett play. So I thought proactively is important to start. And one thing that's very important also equally is to understand what Nietzsche once say, only something which had no history is capable of being defined. When it has a history, you have to rethink, recontextualize, bring it into discourse among ourselves, because the fundamental sense of freedom is freedom from change, freedom from imprisonment, from enslavement by others. The rest is the extension of this sense, or else metaphor. And I think metaphor is what artists, people like us, do most effectively, because we never really care for direct translation. We're always trying to find way to enrich the object we made, the handmade object, the conceptually made object. So that means somewhere we think of ourselves, as Walt Whitman once say, I am as bad as the worst, thank God. I am as good as the best. And I always admire Immanuel Kant, one of my favorite philosophers, who say, from the crooked timber of humanity, nothing ever came out straight. So artists, all of us, you all, adore and we treasure the imperfection of things, of our hands, the line we made, the form we create. It is always the imperfection that we learn from. So the get-go, let me see if I can show you a few things. I hope that it will make clear that, for example, this is the first installation I made in October 2000. I was very obsessed with Tatlin, one of the proponent of Russian constructivist movement, partly because at the time I was doing a lot of construction works. I was a taper, I was a house painter, so I certainly know how to use this material, sheetrock, wood, lights, strings, and plaster and paint. So it was really thrilling to make this site-specific piece as an homage to Tatlin. And it's really equally thrilling to know that it is made on this very particular site. It's about 1,000 square feet. And during the course of its 1 month duration, only after that will be destroyed. So it have a constructive aspect to it as it does with destructive aspect. And I was interested in between, where thing lies in between what is meant to be constructed and what is meant to eventually destroy it. So as you can see now, on the left is the first pamphlet of the Brooklyn Rail and was found in 98. It was bi-weekly. So every two weeks we will print out this pamphlet. If you can see, it's 8 by 11. It's folded in half. Therefore, 4 columns would appear. So a review on the left, maybe a story on the right. Sometimes it's a film review. Sometimes it's a poem be printed. And we would distribute, we would hand it out to um, the L train commuter, which is on Bedford Avenue in Williamsburg. And in those days, there are very little people, and you can see how spare the neighborhood looked in October 2000 on the front here, on the right, in the first cover of the Brooklyn Rail. And you can see the way the design is, constructed, very similar to Russian constructivism. The fonts, the whole spirit of it. And let me see, I move along. And these are collage painting made between 2000 and 2006 or 7. I made so many of these. I consider these drawings and painting and collage with collage elements as a way that a musician would play his or her, I would say, rehearsal. You practice your scale. So I've been doing it religiously for a long time in knowing that when I undertake a certain space, I know what to do, how to generate scale and create those construction that you've just seen a few minutes ago. And then some point I began working on the rail around 2006 or 7 due to so many difficulty in ensuring a photograph of an artist, critic, or writer because they would charge us a fee. So out of frustration, I began training myself how to make those portraits. It took a while to make them. It would last between 10 to 12 hours. So here you have 6 portraits. I will go to the 6th minute, but on the top is the legendary 33 years editor-in-chief of Art America, Elizabeth Baker, who we call it her as Betsy Baker, a dear friend, and she was a guest critic in the Brooklyn Rail in September 2010. On the right, in the middle, is the great Iranian-born artist Serena Sat. And on her right is the polymath, writer, critic, artist, novelist. I don't know what else he did, but that is the late Brian O'Doherty. Many of you might have read his famous essays called Inside the White Cube. Under the pen name as an artist, also referred as Patrick Ireland. And right below Bessie is the late Bob Ryman, who's known for making white painting on square format and nothing ever square and never repeat the same white. A miracle as an artist, Bob was and still very important artist today. And next to Bob is Carol Walker. So these are interview we undertook with artists. It often very comprehensive, between 5 to 7,000 words. And the reason why the rail is known for its lengthy interviews, partly because we are interested in having the artists share their life's journey to our readers. You can imagine what it's like, in what context the artist was brought into this world, their upbringing, however difficult, however privileged or not, and the way that they leave their home, in which point they decide to take on the journey, moving to a certain place to be belong to a certain community, struggle their way through, to whom they have shared their own experience, and then reaching their maturity. And I'm very important to understand that projection, and then even when they reach their maturity, how they sustain it. So all of that journey is so important to the rail, and that's why we are very well known for our interviews. And on the right, the last one, believe it or not, it was 2009. I can be wrong, but I don't think so. When Martin Puryear had his retrospective at MoMA, and I asked David Levi Strauss, one of our great editor, consulting editor, great critic, to interview Martin. And Martin, it's hard to believe, but he was somewhat suspicious. He had never had a photo taken of his face because he's afraid the devil will take his soul away. So he asked me instead, would I not make the portrait, but put on his work? But eventually, when it come around later, I began painting, making the drawing, what you see in the background, which is really a cross hatching grid, mostly vertical line repeatedly, and then horizontal lines, and similar would deploy with the diagonal, both diagonal, and that's what you have. Meditation, which I will explain a bit further, but let me move ahead a little bit. And here is a good example of one of the Rail Culture project. It's quite large. This space was, I believe, 100,000 square feet. And we did it in 2 months. That meant clean the whole floor, put up walls and lights, because this space had been abandoned for 20-something years. So what you see here is two marvelous painting by the painter Johanna Pusset Dots. And let me see, I can click and show you a little bit of video of it.
We had made arrangements with the people at Industry City to have a gallery space here. This fall, we thought, since it was coming to be the first anniversary after the Superstorm Sandy, that we would have that be the theme of the show. We thought of curators, and one of the first people we thought of was Phong, who we admired. Daedalus had been a supporter of the rail for a while, for several years also, and he knows everybody. And we thought that if anybody could do a really great version of a show, also in several years also.
I was very moved by the idea of doing a Sandy show, partly because my studio of 25 years of work, along with several artists in my building, at least 10 of them, were destroyed by Sandy. It was 6 feet of water. Talking to Jack, we both agree that it will be very somber and rather depressing affair if we were to curate a show comprised by just Sandy victims. I decided that in order to make it a bit more festive and community-oriented, that we would invite 50% of Sandy victims, and the other 50 would be artists whose lives, of whose work haven't been affected by Sandy, and they would join in to enhance the spirit of solidarity. In a way, the spirit of solidarity is the key word of this exhibition. And in order to share the various sections in the rail, especially with Jack's consent and Daedalus Foundation terrific enthusiasm, we were able to create a robust and generous public programming, from several symposia on conservation of damaged works, interviews with Sandy victims through Art International Radio, many dance and music performances, film screenings, to commissioning 20 poets who would write about their direct or indirect experiences of Sandy's destruction. It was a really profound healing experience for all of us in the end. So that's a good example of a rather major undertaking, but still My whole idea about curation is very simple, you guys, because the word curo, Latin word, means to care for. The curator should have a loving, caring aspect to his or her intention, and the other half, part of it, require is a good sense of organization. So the two come together. If you know how to organize, if you know how to curate, you're in business. And I never gone to school to curate, really. In fact, I've been teaching it. But most important thing about curation is to understand how things sit in space. That doesn't mean you would choose the work and you impose on the space. In fact, it's vice versa. It's the opposite. Sorry, it would be the opposite. You see the space and choose the work that would sit in the space more harmoniously. My grandmother once say, if you live in a long tube, be thin. If you live in the barrel, be round. So that's always been my philosophy. So let me see, I can show you one or two more small video of how it changes. Like that one was 100,000 square feet. This one is, I don't know, maybe 25,000, 2-floor, but it's very eccentric space, I would say. I'm the publisher, editor-in-chief of the Brooklyn Rail. First of all, when I came to Red Bull under the invitation of Max Wolf, the manager there, I at once discovered the space being quite unconventional. It has incredible curved walls, and in addition, you also have the men's room and the women's room painted in glossy, acidic fluorescent red and yellow. It had all the potential to be, I would say, a film set for an Austin Power movie. My immediate response was maybe the theme of psychedelic.
I've never been in a show that had pink ceilings and a pink furry carpet.
It's rather a playful response to each situation. Jim Lambie floor was essential, which is something I wanted to establish immediately. I wanted to have Ronapondic head in the tree, and of course, Ugo Roninone, this enormous head. I think this called Sunrise was the two works that I wanted to have that dialogue.
I was in the hospital and I woke up happily on huge amounts of morphine, and I was hallucinating, and I had this image of my head floating up in the air away from my body, and it kept recurring, and it was a tree, and all of a sudden it just left my body.
I was really good at taking things apart. I wasn't very good at putting them back together, but it was sort of like a classic thing of me getting a birthday gift and immediately within hours it had been taken apart, so I tried to figure out how it worked. I think I was actually just staring at someone's ear gauges on the subway and just thinking, oh man, wouldn't it be great to just blow some bubbles through those? And that's kind of how it happened.
I showed it at PS1 in 1987. That was the only time I showed it. Been hauling it around ever since. And you know, a couple of times I thought I would throw it away, but I didn't really want to. The kitty litter has that sort of desert sand kind of vibe to it, which I sort of liked.
In being in the show, I was involved in doing the signage in front, because all my work is sort of text-based. Language is very ephemeral. So you see words, you don't see words, you forget information. So that has that sort of idea of here, not there, this whole psychedelic sort of supernatural aspect to it.
Usually with all of the work, I always start with a grid of language, and often it's found language. And then on top of that, I do certain kinds of procedures. I have these 18th and 19th century iconographic encyclopedias that I project and trace the silhouettes of and create these mappings of that information.
It took 3 years. I carved, I constructed. If it's necessary, I'm willing to chop the piece in half.
I think you will remember as a total environment. You remember it's an art experience, a visual experience. And that kind of oddity of experience is a way that I would prefer to think of it as psychedelic, you know? All right, let me see how many more. It shouldn't be too many. Oh, this one is cool. This one is a show that is, essentially you will like this because it's the last performance of Jonas Makers. It's about 50,000 square feet. This exhibit is a good example of how a rail cultural project corresponds to the urgency of our monthly journal, the Brooklyn Rail, in that it was put together in 1 month. This exhibit, I should mention, has 2 parts. The first has taken its title from the artist Lauren Barnes' neon work. Artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. It acknowledges the powerful and productive role artists can and should play in our current culture. The first part features 35 artists working in various media. Together, they invoke our current social and political issues. Our particular focus are human rights and equality, immigration, foreign relations, the environment, and climate change, all topics of alarming concern today. The range of these works, from the intimate to the monumental, reflects the variety of depths that these important issues impact upon our lives. The second part of the show, Friends in Solidarity, a group show with no specific theme of 28 artists join in the spirit of coming together as a protest against the divisiveness of the Trump agenda. This is one way to create a non-hierarchical network of social relationship now, using space that is still undefined and had yet fallen into a routine of habitual uses and bureaucratic rigidity.
Motherfucker! You! Unpardonable, motherfucker! Unpardonable, motherfucker! Unpardonable!
So he ranted like that for a good, I think, 4 minutes straight. And many of us who know Jonas, we were blown away by it. Those people who did not know who he was, I think they was horrified by him. But in any case, let me see what else I can show you guys. Well, this is another show of climate change, Occupy Kobe. This is probably the show in Venice. Maybe let me show you this one. It's a collateral project we did in Venice. It's nice because we were able to bring together Rigrit Tavajani, Thomas Vu, and some of their graduate students from Colombia came and joined and helped cooking. at the opening and the closing reception. We were there for 6 months straight. The aim was very simple. We stage an exhibition dedicated to the singing city of Venice. It's really tied around the climate change as an issue, urgent issue, where we also have robust public programming, where we invited artists to talk with scientists, with poets, with philosophers, and while we're working on the site with graduate students from art history and journalism to produce their own river rail. So it's really about bringing community together through the arts humanity. So there was dance, performances, there were music, there were endless film screening and panel discussion. And so here's a brief Instagram post that I just want to share with you guys.
There you go.
The first and most essential painter is the liveliness of fantasy. The first and most essential poet is enthusiasm.
Think about the urgency of the environmental crisis.
Life is lots of presents. Porto a ponte.
Yes, I want to behave.
There's no shred of doubt. There's some debate as to how it happened.
Anyone who wants to become an artist should contact us.
Artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy. So it is our collective love to this city. So you can see that. I mean, I have a few more things, but I'm not so sure. I don't want to take too much time, but let me just show two more. This is kind of important because this is the discovery of our daily Zoom program. Is called New Social Environment Lunchtime Conversation. So we launched it on Tuesday, March 16, 2020. And I realized that looking at the formation, the grid here, that appears all those people's faces. Some are friends, some are guests. What I learned is that even with technology, as we are doing now, you guys, we can generate human warmth through the coldness of technology. And I realized it corresponded with my portrait, but allow me just to share with you instead of talking. This is Tom McGlynn in conversation with the great Stanley Whitney. It was, I believe, conversation number 25 a while ago. Anyway, I'm here at my studio listening to some of those conversations and realizing just now the screen that really humanizes everything everyone faces on the grid corresponds to the grid, those faces also in my portrait installation. I believe this is conversation number 2. Up to this point, I have counted recently, I have amassed about 26 of these portrait installation. In other words, this is one piece, 20 faces on the top, 20 on the bottom, interrupted by a meditation painting, a group of 20, to break up the monotonous of faces, really. That's the only sole reason I can tell you. But otherwise, they are my symphony. Every individual faces have his, her, and their unique musical sound. Yes, you can identify a few here, I'm sure. But as a whole, they really come together to play the symphony, at least in my own equivalent, as much as I try very hard to get close to Walt Whitman's Democratic Vista. Yes, indeed. So that was a serious epiphany for me. And here is the, I guess would be our weekly Zoom that we've been doing. I think the end of the month will be reaching number 1,000 episode. So what you see here is the Instagram post for the weekly, which is mean 5 days straight. So I guess it begins with Robert Wilson. I think in conversation with Willem Dafoe about when they collaborate together, when they first met in New York City. And then it continues with Martin Puryear talking about the slavery content hidden below his lyrical abstraction. And then there's Philip Guston's daughter talking about her father's work. And then John Jonas, and then Noam Chomsky. And I don't know, you guys should just have a look, and then we can talk.
You get tested every day, but for example, I couldn't leave Toronto because to re-enter, I'd have to re-quarantine.
I haven't left a 10-block radius of Midtown East for 9 months.
But people tell me that New York is very special right now.
Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail New Social Environment.
So I can make you a sculpture. I don't have a problem with that. But I think the main thing is that the story has got to become part of it, the actual history, the truth.
2/3 of his painting output was in the last 1/5 of his painting career. We were aware of the richness of that we wanted to share with the world.
I think one reason I chose to focus as much as I have on performance is because I really like to work with other people.
I don't think the question is that, you can't make the work if you're not from that space. I think the problem people have is when you don't do it well and when you don't do it respectfully.
Well, the complexity is real, but it is not out of the range of the general public to sufficiently understand.
My other form of ideal city would be one in which we redefine our borders from outmoded ideas of municipality so that the underpinning of place is actually thought through by the acknowledgement that water is life.
By virtue of the authority delegated to me by the Board of Trustees of the University of the Arts, from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Sell a soul to the devil, securities clearance, praise, offerings to hilltops, throw of the dice, werewolves, orishas, Papa Legba, meet up after dark, trickster down and dirty, trickster in the nunnery, impudent or oblique, trickster in the binary, let's get trickster outside the settlement, evolves, cavorts, hypnotizes, measure of the battle for transforming to indigenous time, post-government time. It was shadows, it was mountains, it was nukes to guide us.
So what you guys see here is Weekend Journal. This is where every Saturday and Sunday on our Instagram post, we would invite artists across the country, sometimes even in Asia and Europe, to share, no more than 3-4 minutes of what they've been making during the pandemic. It became hugely popular. As you can see here on the left is Ursula von Weidenswart. Middle is Michael Zhu, and on the right is Zazie Alapur. So it was ecstatic for all of us to be able to share everything like that.
Assaulting weapons, hatched in trap of mind, floods the way if peace comes at end of fight. There is leaping, cheer, piper pipes a song to hear, and you hear it loud and clear. Trickster, pipe this song to me. How much longer will I be? Covert operation. Bring us down. It was a girl's turn. Put on mask or play dead or inhabit.
What is this feeling? My skin again. How could I forget? How could you forget? How could I forget? Now we found names again. How could I forget? How could you forget? How could I forget? At the moment, the world is bitter.
So the middle is George Misaka, who is probably the world's most, I would say, well-respected conservator of old masters painting and fresco. He's so good in his job that the Met allowed him to retire early So he can be brought in Europe from different important sites, whether even at the Uffizi or the Louvre, restoring Lucio, restoring Piero de Francesca, you can see here. So he can train the next generation restorer or conservator, because that art is also becoming exceedingly rare. But anyway, it's a thrill to have George walking around and share his expertise with all of us, you know. I think I'm gonna stop you guys because I want to be able to talk to you guys. I want you to ask questions. So otherwise it's just monologue, which is deadly. Is that okay? Thank you so much. Tammy, back to you.
Thank you, Phong. That was awesome. Thank you so much. If you have questions, you can drop them into the chat and then I can read those as they come in. If you're here on campus, feel free to go to one of the moderators in the room who can help you get your question into the chat. Phong, I have a question actually, just more of a clarification. So the portraits that you are drawing in pencil, are those all drawn from photograph?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very clear that from the beginning when I began making portraits from life, it's very anxious situation for me and for the sitter. So they ended up looking Giacometti drawing because I'm not so sure which line is correct anymore. You know, it was not easy to attain the likeness of the person. You know, even so I learned, you know, gradually it's better to work out a system where you can work an hour and here and there, and the continuity of the process is retained. So it's not disrupt to this anxiousness, the feeling whether it's going to end up looking like the person or not, you know. So I learned a lot through having observed Chuck Close made his portrait, having immersed in the great deal of how Solowit make his own drawing. You know, there's a way in which you can mediate between impersonality, the impersonalness of it all, and yet you can still bring the great warmth with your hand in it. So I create a system where a photo can be taken and then it'll be printed out to the proportional size to the paper. And then I would use the tracing paper, only trace the outline lightly, and then retrace it on the paper. Only lightly to have the structure, but otherwise everything else is drawn by hand, very slowly, building up the gradients of cross-hatching. So that's how it's got created. It's able to create this incredible volumetric sense of three-dimensionality, but it's all cross-hatching very slightly from 7H all the way to 2B. I guess I hardly ever use 3B or 4B. So everything have a layer. You develop a layer gradually, and it's very interesting, very satisfying. It's completely a meditation for me to do it now. And I made those for about 890 something of them.
Oh,
I'll
wow.
be 1,000 or so in a year or so. And so everything I do in order to be as productive as I am, I can show you quickly. Can you just hold 1 second? I'll be right.
Absolutely.
So you'll be frightened how systematic I am, how organized. These are my daily tasks.
That seems almost like an art form in itself, for sure.
It's a disaster when it comes to the last few days of the rail before it get put to bed. But you can see some cases I would get up as early as 2, 3 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
So I go by if everything is written it out in advance, and I just go and cross. You can see here. You see one. I get up at 5 a.m.
There's actually a question that's really responding, at least corresponding to this right now in the chat. Phong is curator, artist, editor at Brooklyn Rail. What does your day-to-day look like? And also having in many ways absolved yourself of the demands that come with the pursuit of formal training, but having gotten to a position where these people now seek your guidance, what keeps your work and spirit fresh and still separate from those demands?
Oh, well, I think having grown up, I was born during the height of the Vietnam War. So seeing people, being tortured, killed, and then having many of my home bombed, moving from one city to the next. And then when the war ended 1975, my family were blacklisted, so we were sent to labor camp. So we were there for 3.5 years until we figured out a way to flee the country, to flee the tyranny of the Communist Party. That's what we came here for, ended up somehow landed in the worst, I guess, ugly township of Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It's called Ben Salem, where my parents create a cleaning service where we clean wealthy people's homes, synagogues, churches. And it's American dream. We came here for freedom. We work hard. And all my brother and sister are doctor and lawyer. I'm the black sheep, you guys. I mean, I might appear to be successful, but I'm running a paper that is free. It neither spoon feed the readers nor condescend them. It's very incredibly generous. And I feel this is my life commitment. This is what I ought to be doing, is to give back. And so I figured out a way to do it productively. I think I'm very lucky. I have a strong grandmother who suffered a great deal, you guys. She once said something very profound when I was 10 years old. I remember it was New Year's Day. She took me to the back of the house, her house, looking across the river into the distant mountain. And she squeezed my hand and she looked at me. She said, grandson, when you grow up, you will suffer like anyone else is on earth. And don't ever think once that your suffering is more unique than theirs. But make sure you suffer the right way. And that's what she said. And it stayed with me forever, you guys. Forever. To suffer the right way is to do what you love. It's what Nietzsche called amor fati, to love your fate. You can't really cherry picking the part that is happy and ignore the part that is not so happy. To love your fate, you have to take them all in. You cannot. That's what we are going through today. As terrible the political social condition as America's going through, it's not the end of America, because free thinker like us hasn't been tortured yet. So it's a good sign. Book hasn't been burned, artwork has not been destroyed, culture is still strong. So that's what I'm aware of. I'm aware of growing up in Vietnam. None of that is promised to be any form of permanency. You have to memorize poems. You take poems with you in case books get burned. It's transgressive. poetry. Art can be the same manner as you guys know, you know. So we very lucky. We just have to making sure that somehow we must we must come together to communicate why the arts and humanity is so important, so essential. Right now, too much of it is been too associated with the cultural elites, you know? That's why the rail is so important for me and for those who I work with, is to make it is free. You know, so people who've been writing books for each other, among our professor colleagues, now they can write for the rail. They can write in a way that everyone can understand. You know, that's very important to communicate the most complex thought, and it must be communicated through very simple language. Not an easy thing to do, but that's what we're trying to do with the rail every day, you know. Does that answer your question?
Yes, actually, she replied, "Thank you so much." That was lovely. Thank you.
Welcome.
We have somebody else on campus actually that is asking. They said David Hockney said that portraiture is an intuitive process and that not everybody can do portraits. And this person would like to know what you think about that.
Well, that person, is her name? Hello.
No, it's actually coming from one of our classrooms, so I don't have a
Sorry, you guys. Next time will not be webinar because the Brooklyn Rail have able to do it.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, you can do it. Don't let technology dictate you. We have to do the reverse, you know?
Yes.
But anyway, yes, to answer that question, it's very unexpected for me because I always thought I would be an abstract artist. You know, I thought that I would be making big installation like the one you saw from the very beginning. I make so many big one, and I love the idea. It's made and then get destroyed, you know? I guess the study retain, and it gets sold. The people love those studies, you know? So there's a side of me is very subversive. You know, I don't want to produce art for consumption, you know, that can easily be bought, you know. But eventually, I'm still am trying to figure a way, as the rail, as you guys see, the rail to me is a work of art. But I don't want to tell people that. You know, I'm scared of America still. It's like what Soren Kierkegaard once say: once you label me, you negate me. So I don't want people to read what I'm doing all the time. But to answer your question about portraiture and regarding portraiture in reference to David Hockney and other people, I think it's just a matter of bringing the imminent warmth to the pages of the Brooklyn Rail. Because when we print the photograph on the newsprint, it looks super cold, you know? It doesn't look so inviting. So I felt like if I really care enough to make a portrait of whoever we interview, it will transpire that great warmth from my own hand, my labor, you know. And but I don't want it to be taken away from the written words either. So there's a very interesting relationship because the printed word and the reproduced portrait that I made, it has to have the very fluid relationship, you know, and it has been for the most part. So that's really thrilling to me. But over the years, I think that portraiture have proven to be, I would say, not as popular as used to be, but as you know, figuration in the last decade or more has been very visible. There are painters like Lisa Zuskevich, people like John Curran, There are younger people now, like, I don't know, people like maybe Titus Gaffar, Jordan Castile, exploring portraiture in a very serious manner, But I think, portraiture is something that I didn't think of it in the beginning. It just happened. It just happened. I mean, I think without the Brooklyn Rail as a context, my portrait is fairly competent. Without the Brooklyn Rail, it wouldn't be regarded as seriously as it has thus far. So it's all integrated into what I'm doing, I don't know whether that answered your question, but we can talk about further what it means, portraiture in itself, in terms of, art history. If you want me to go further along, I can certainly be happy to explore further.
No, I think that was excellent. We do have another question that might be a nice segue to the exhibition that you juried. The question is, what is your process for whittling down over 1,300 submissions to 49 through computer images?
Yeah, when you do so many of these, jury, as I have, whether in person will be much preferable. But again, the main object still retain its own. Each of them it has own aura. And when you are the maker, as I am, I think you can intuit it in so many ways. So the process is a pleasurable one, where it would take 3 separate days to do it, to look through carefully, and to bring the final group together that makes sense to the context of the show, between subject matter, between the exploration of materials. I think it's very important. And how can I sort of conceive the drawing itself as a medium? How far has it expanded? Has it gone to different permutation that respond to the condition where we are today? As I was talking to Tammy just yesterday, as we were checking, I mean, American art have added to an amazing growth, evolution to world's art in a way. I don't think let's take the emergence of abstract expressionism. I prefer it New York School, because Bonnet Newman and Art Reinhardt and Rothko are not considered expressionistic in their own work at all. It's very, very sublime, very calm, not so calm, but wherever the calm and picturesque is not associated the way that we see Pollock or Franz Klein or Willem de Kooning, But nevertheless, when the emergence of New York School in the 50s, right after the war ended in 45, you can see they began traveling, the work get curated and travel to Europe, to the major city. And European artists respond to New York School. And they were very perplexed. They was very surprised and delighted, and very influenced what they saw, whether school in Paris, whether artists in Rome and elsewhere, in even Warsaw and London. And you can see the scale change. Their reading of surrealism and cubism, and whatever other ism that associate with modern art. American artists have been very fruitfully explore that possibility in expanding it ever since. As I was talking about Tammy, for example, you take Pollock painting. And I remember in 1943, when before the Guggenheim was built in the early 60s, it was called The Art of a Century by Peggy Guggenheim. And she would have this annual spring salon group show where she would put together, juxtapose European modern master and young American emergent artists, you know. So on instant, I think Mondrian was being asked as a juror as I am now in this context. He came early and he saw 1941 Pollock's painting. It's called Stenographic Figures. It's now owned by the Guggenheim. Maybe it's MoMA now. I know it go back and forth. It's hard to remember, but I think it's MoMA owns it now. And he stood in front of the painting for a long time. And when Peggy Guggenheim came along and said, you know, we have hundreds other work to look at. You already spent a good 15 minutes with this one painting. And you know what he say? I think I discovered the most exciting, important artists among the young American since I've been here just a year and a half. Isn't that interesting? He anticipate Jackson Pollock be the one who will take and carry further what he had done. In other words, what did Mondrian do in 1911? Being 9 or 10 years older than Picasso, he came to Paris. He realized he's so far behind. He did not understand Cubism. Just like Matisse too. Matisse had to play catch up with Picasso in Prague, you know? So 1911, that's when Mondrian began making those wonderful apple tree. You guys seen it. And he reduced it, he analyzed it, and essentially all these interlocking diagonal and horizontals and vertical line reduced slowly, gradually. The reduction became more amplified, and then he ended up only have the relationship between the vertical and horizontal lines, right? But what did they do? They always retain in the square format. Very important to remember what Mondrian did there. The square format sometimes is also tilted a little bit, but nevertheless horizontal in relation to vertical. And when that happened, it meant that he brought Cubism to his reductive conclusion, logical conclusion. Thereby, the extended form of the horizontal line similarly applied with the vertical, it go beyond the canvas, you guys. It's architectural, the form. So what is going to be the next consequential step is Pollock. So he took the painting off the easel, he put on the floor, he walked on it, he dripped the paint, he created a rhythm, right? And therefore the act of painting became performative. And that's when Alan Capro created happenings. And from happenings extended from the studio into the environment outside and eventually led to land art. That's American contribution to world art, significant. I was talking to Tammy about how Michael Heiser in Nevada, in his great city, where he once said, if you want to go to see the pyramid, you go to Egypt. You want to see my city, you go to Nevada. Huge undertaking. So he would take his motorcycle and he would ride it into the desert. And I was saying to Tammy, you could only see the drawing, the mark making with aerial viewpoint from the helicopter. And that's how he recorded his drawing. So the drawing expanded in many multitude of ways. So the process for me to make selection was a pleasure one, because I'm trying to understand the traditional drawing, the norm can still retain, and it's not been marginalized. And then there was all the way of rethinking, recreating context of drawing anew. So I think that's what I saw through the whole process. And unfortunately, I had to narrow it down to the 4 works that I thought make interesting dialogue for one another. But don't feel discouraged. It's just one of those instances, never feel rejects as the, as a kind of retreating idea of what you made, but rather it's another way to participate in the near future when someone else come along and understand your work better than I do. It's just a matter of curation for this instant. It's not a judgment to those who did not make into this 4 selection, So I wouldn't take it negatively at all. I think context is everything, so hopefully the other contexts will emerge and you understand what you do have value differently. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That was so wonderfully put. Thank you, Phong. The exhibition's wonderful. This opportunity to listen to you speak has been wonderful. And we thank you so much for being here. For all the guests that are on here, please be creative and well. Thank you.
You're welcome.